There are a lot of miking techniques that you can use to record an ensemble in stereo. Two of the most common are a spaced pair of omnis and one of several different near coincident pairs of cardioids, like ORTF. So each of these stereo configs is pretty simple, but they both have their benefits and drawbacks. This is not a comparison video to show you the differences between the two, but just to focus on a spaced pair for a minute. So one of the drawbacks of a spaced pair of omnis is that the stereo imaging is less precise. They tend to sound bigger, maybe more plush in a lot of ways to some people, but the imaging is not as precise as ORTF and cardioids. And within that realm of the stereo imaging, you can actually have instruments that are in a certain place in the stereo field but sound like they're somewhere else, or even potentially hear them move around the stereo field, which is kind of unnerving, actually. So that happened to me recently. I'm going to play a piece for you here, and at the beginning of this piece, it's pretty quiet with just a quiet chord, piano chord in the orchestra, and then there's a very exposed harp part on top of that. And you will hear the harpist move, even though she is very much stationary. So I'm going to go ahead and listen to this and see if you can hear the movement. So that's a very short clip, but to me it's very apparent hearing her move. I guess I should say that all of us hear stereo probably slightly differently depending on our ears, how old we are, what kind of hearing damage we might have, but even more importantly, our brains interpret all of this sound that comes into our ears, and our brains might interpret them slightly differently. And so add to that you might be listening to it with headphones, earbuds, a good pair of monitors, a bad pair of monitors in the car, or God forbid, even a single mono monitor like an Alexa speaker. But all of those factor into how much you hear the movement of this harp. For me, it sounds as though she starts in the center, roughly, moves slightly right, and then quickly back over to the left. So she is seated on the left. She's about 85 degrees to the left, almost totally left. But it's not until the end of those few notes that she actually sounds like she's roughly in the correct place. And I think there are a couple factors at play here. Number one is she's playing around 1,000 hertz. Her notes are roughly around there. And so the wavelength of 1,000 hertz, I believe, is 34 centimeters. I actually looked it up and I forget, but it's close to that. My spaced pair of omnis was 50 centimeters. So she's getting pretty close to playing frequencies that are half the wavelength, or rather, whose wavelength is half of what my spaced pair are. And she's all the way on the side. So at some point, if she gets up high enough that her wavelength is 25 centimeters, wavelength of 25 centimeters, half the distance of my spaced pair, you're going to get weird phasing issues. And you do. When you hear this, if you hear her in the center, it's an ambiguous center. It's out of phase slightly. And certainly if she's on the right, then it's very out of phase. The other thing I think that is at play here, not just the spacing and the frequency of her notes, but also just the first reflections we might be getting from walls or other things. So this was a live performance, and there was only one run-through prior, and I didn't even hear this issue when we were setting up and recording the run-throughs. With more time, I might have tried to address this one of maybe three different ways. I could have moved the omnis farther from the orchestra, but I liked where they are, and that would affect the mix of the orchestra and the room, how much of the hall we were hearing. And it was a good sound. It was a good hall, so I didn't really want to affect that. A couple other things I could have tried, which I think would have solved it to some degree, would be to angle the omnis out slightly because they were pointing directly forward. These are omnis, but they do have some directionality depending on the frequency. That might have helped. I could have also, if it really is frequency dependent, I could have closed the spacing on the omnis, gone from 50 down to 40. That would have made a slightly smaller stereo image, but I think it might have solved this in addition to the angling. So regardless, I didn't hear it that day, so I'm going to have to fix it in mix. Luckily, I had the forethought to put a spot mic on the harpsichord. So I put a hypercardioid on her fairly close, so I can use that. But also, I recorded this entire performance with an additional stereo pair, which was a pair of cardioids in ORTF. The cardioids were above and behind the omnis on a boom, and so I think maybe 45 inches behind the omnis. Sorry, I'm switching from metric to American, but you get the drift. You can see them. So I have a couple options here in mix. So let's go ahead and listen now to the same thing over again, and then I will play the cardioids to hear what those sound like. So I will play the omnis once and then the cardioids. So clearly the cardioids, as you would expect, it's a very different image, but that harpist is cemented right in her position. And I have a couple scopes up here. I have a phase correlation meter here and one over here. This one actually draws a graph and the yellow line. And this guy is just a needle, but this needle roughly is the same as this yellow line. So 0 here is no correlation, which is why you see it here at 0 when there's nothing playing. Above that, up to +1 is positive correlation. Below that is negative correlation. So there is no formula for this, but anytime you record with spaced pair of omnis versus ORTF cardioids, the omnis are going to jump around a bit more. They're going to go into the negative at times, and the cardioids probably won't pretty much at all. They'll almost always stay positive. And like I said, there's no formula for this here, but if you see it dipping down near approaching -1 or staying below, staying negative for extended periods of time, it might indicate you have some phase issues, which is why, obviously, I think phase is a major thing here. So let's just do the same thing again, listening to the omnis twice and then the cardioids once to watch the phase meters. Okay, so I want to also play the spot mic for you, which is here. It's mono, so of course we have perfect stereo or phase correlation. So I have a couple options. I can mix in the cardioids underneath the omnis to help cement her image to some degree, but it's going to alter the rest of the ensemble. So again, I'm going to always play the omnis by themselves one time, and then I will play a mixture of the cardioids underneath them. So that helps, but it's not a perfect solution. I can bring the cardioids up a little bit more here, maybe to 2.5 dB below the omnis. So that will help a little bit more with the imaging, but it's going to introduce some other issues. So I will play this, but I'll continue to play it with the cardioids up to negative 2.5 dB. And then after it plays for a bit, I'll AB so you can hear how it's affecting the rest of the orchestra. So as you can tell, if you add too much of the cardioids under the omnis, it starts to mix too much. It starts to create all sorts of problems. You're going to have comb filtering, ambiguous stereo imaging, everything. So the other option then is to mix in the spot mic a bit, which is, let's see, got to get my shortcuts here. Yeah, so now I will play the omnis by themselves and then the omnis with the spot mic after that. Okay, so that helped even more with the stereo imaging. The trade-offs here, number one, she's louder, and I could bring the spot mic down, but the spot mic is also very close to her, and so instead of just bringing her up and centering, or rather cementing the image where it should be, you're also pulling her forward, which is really not what you want. So obviously there is no perfect solution here. The perfect solution would be to fix it while I recorded it. But with both the cardioids and the spot mic, I'm confident that I'll be able to get something that sounds pretty good.